Good day, everyone. So I wanted to make more combat-related content, but unfortunately, as you can see in the top right-hand corner, my ping is not playing along. So you can see here the ping is really, really high and very, very unstable. And long story short, basically our ISP is suffering due to some citywide power outages and so on. So it doesn't matter if you send a couple of kilobytes, we download gigabytes. The ping is just not very, very good. And when I went into the Spiral Abyss to make a couple of videos, so for instance, I wanted to do a Kokomi versus Shingshu Hydra application video, who does like more and so on, and a couple of other combat stuff. I had like funny things that you'd hit the enemy and then your character teleports, and it just didn't make for a good viewing experience. So we'll obviously redo those things and send them out once the internet and so on is fixed. But in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll sort of put up a previous Spiral Abyss run. Obviously, I haven't released this before, but it's the full version of my Pyro Icon Shenhe run. So it's here for your viewing. If you don't want to listen to me, just mute me and watch the run if you're really interested. But otherwise, let's talk a bit about Genshin Impact and whether we've got enough content in the game. Now, the big takeaway from today's discussion that I want you to think about is the word scalability, and I'll sort of explain this as we go on. So the typical argument that a lot of people make is that Genshin Impact does not have enough content for a simple reason. If you look at a standard or a typical gacha game, you might get, let's say, X amount of content, and as a result, the company makes Y amount of revenue. Genshin Impact, in contrast, gives us quite a bit more content, let's say 4x content, and they also bring in quite a lot more revenue, let's say 20y. So obviously, the argument right here is that for the amount of content that we have received, the amount of money they make is too much. In other words, they should be giving us more content to compensate. So that is the typical argument that I've seen on the internet, and I think there was even a video why Genshin F2P is a scam or something like that that actually sort of made this argument in the first place. And I think this argument is highly ignorant, and I'll speak from the perspective as someone that's worked at a multinational firm as a developer. So think about scalability. If you've got a small team of developers and you sort of want to now upsize your team to a medium sort of set of developers, how difficult is that? Well, it's not really that difficult. There are some issues and so on, but that is way easier than trying to upscale, let's say, a medium-sized development team into a much larger development team. And this is because of a couple of practicalities. The first being, when you've got a live service game like we've got here with Genshin Impact, the guys have a certain set of milestones, and they've got like their internal like development roadmap that they need to follow, and it's not something that you can just willy-nilly change. It's something that they have to strictly abide by, and that's how they can deliver consistent content. I would probably guess that Genshin Impact internally is probably at about version 3.5 or something like that, because you always want to be at least a couple of versions ahead in terms of where the live game is. So for us to just say that we can throw money at the problem, hire more developers, and suddenly next month we've got the perfect end game, procedurally generated dungeons, all of that, wow, it's not going to work like that. For them to really deviate from their current existing content plan and so on, it's going to be very difficult. So we might see more and more content in the, let's say, more like 9 months. I'd probably be even optimistic, like let's say for within the next year and a half. That's where we will really only start seeing the impact of them hiring more developers today. So the development time and like sort of what their plans are and so on won't just scale immediately with the number of developers. And you can also think about this more logically. If you bring in developers, then these new developers also need to understand the ecosystem. They need to understand exactly what the versioning software is, the coding practices and standards of the company. There's so much that you just need to also acquaint them with. And you also then need to have like project managers. You need to write the epics, the stories, the Jira board. You need to do this. There's like so much in terms of management. And once you get more and more developers, this becomes, I don't want to say exponentially more difficult, but quite a bit more difficult than just having a small team that you can have one or two scrum masters that can help and take over with. A company like Genshin Impact's got quite a lot to manage, and it's not just the developers physically coding up the programming. You've also got the VFX artists that need to make sure that the more content that you're now putting into the game is actually sound, the lighting, the effects, the visual effects, the animations, all of that is good. But if you've got more content, you need more people to test that content. Otherwise, you'll just have a buggy game. You need to make sure it plays well with the console. So in short, development is not just a function of the number of developers you've got, it's also a function of the type of game you've got, the constraints you've got. And I think people just don't want to talk about these things because these are the practical limits that is present and for any AAA studio. And I think the other thing that people don't talk a lot about is the cost issue. So Genshin Impact, if you read, I think there's an Alibaba article on the general server, gaming server that they're running, they're doing quite a bit of like technological engineering, and it's quite a marvel if you read like what they're busy doing in terms of getting this game to run cross-platform as it is, and it's quite expensive to run. So in January 2021, the server cost for keeping up the game, and this is public knowledge, you can find it on YouTube, I might even put a link below, the server cost exceeded the development cost by a factor of 2. In other words, if the development costs in Genshin Impact were, let's say, 100 million, the server costs were about 200 million. I'm obviously just making those figures up, but they did state quite clearly in the articles that it costed them quite a lot more to run all of these free-to-play players in the game. And it does show you that as the popularity of Genshin rises, even if they bring in more money, the cost and the revenue don't always linearly scale. You've got to have now more support staff. You've got to make sure your general gaming servers are up and running. You've also now got to make sure your media managers, your content creators, your community management. It's just a lot. Hopefully you guys can now understand the issue of scalability and why it just won't automatically result in more content. Now, the second big thing that I want to talk about is content creators, because I think they are the elephant in the room and they are the ones sort of preaching this narrative that we need more and more content. So think a bit about this from their perspective. They've got to play this game, they've got to stream this game, and this is the sad thing. A game like Genshin Impact or a PvE game is not as streamable as a PvP game. So if you've got Valorant, you've got CSGO, Overwatch, all of these things, those games are way more easier to stream because what's the gameplay loop? It's you sit and wait, you chat to your community, there's a moment of excitement, and there's like a bit of action, and then there's downtime. Then you sort of talk about what happened in the round, you talk to people in game, people in the comment sections are watching, they want to see the skill and execution, and then you basically rinse repeat. That is way more streamable, and people can make more content around that. But a game like Genshin Impact, once you've run through a Spiral Abyss, once you've done a solo no damage run, once you've exhausted all the bag of tricks that you've got, there's not really that much to do because you've skipped the entire story and you didn't do an in-depth analysis because you just want to get all your primo gems so you can fulfill your wishing addict in front of a live audience. Sorry Mtash, but I've got to take a bit of a jab at you for that. At the end of the day, Genshin, I think people are putting way too much expectations on a game like this, and they're forgetting that a lot of people don't have the time that they've got. If it's your job to play a game professionally and to stream all day long, then do keep in mind that there are a lot of people that cannot keep up with this pace of content. There are people like me that work for a living that literally will not log in, even if it means missing out on a couple of primo gems. I don't care. And I think this is where Genshin Impact also looks at their player base. They look at the amount of time that people spend, the amount of time, not money, but that they spend on the game. And they have a very good sense of how much content is acceptable. I think the biggest problem in Genshin is whenever there's new content, people just sort of almost want to rush it all, down, and they sort of want to make as much YouTube content, because if they don't do it, someone else is going to sort of share the latest Archon quest, or they're going to share like all the treasure chest locations and so on before them, and in essence they'll steal the content that you wanted to make in a certain sense. And hence people sort of complain about the lack of content in Genshin, because a lot of the PvE stuff is so repeatable, whereas if this game was PvP, then your match would have been unique to you. No one else would have had the same match. You guys get what I'm trying to say. So I think the content creators, yeah, if you're a content creator, understand that you're just being unrealistic about the game, and you should probably play 3 or 5 games to fill in their downtime. I've got this very little sympathy for people that wants to enforce more content, where the rest of us can, yeah, we've got to sort of play this game at a decent pace, and we're told there's not enough content to satisfy the people that stream. It's like, dude, we've all got lives, so do take that into account. And I think the balance that miHoYo currently has is just right for the majority of us. Yeah, guys, that's it on this topic. That's literally all that I want to say.